get us moving here in just a moment. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 13 of Mastering Obsession, building your dream career from scratch. Now, today we have a really sick guest. Now, it's somebody that I don't think a lot of people know the importance of their role within DevSlopes. But Stefan Mischook, I'm gonna let him introduce himself here in just a moment as well, take it a little bit further. But Stefan was somebody that I started following back in around 2015, 2016. A little bit of a random fun fact. So when I started going through your courses, I was still married at the time, which is kind of funny. But it was this really fun experience. I know it's always like, well, I was still married at the time. Then people start wondering, well, what happened there? There's all kinds of fun stuff behind that. But I have so many. Yeah, exactly. There's so many stories of me being at like coffee shops and everything, going through your courses, and so it's funny just seeing you. And just to give everybody a little bit of context, Connor, one of our brand marketers, was doing this interview, and the moment I heard your name, I was like, I'm stealing this. There's no way, Connor. Unfortunately, you're going to be able to do this. I'm stealing the thunder immediately, because I think that, Stefan, you have one of the most refreshing views. And the content that you make is remarkable, relying around software engineering. I talk about freelancing all the time and the importance that it plays for getting a job, right? So that being able to bridge that professional gap and people taking you seriously. And I think that one of the things that you bring to the table when talking about I was just watching a video about it on your IG, about the importance of PHP, specifically working with WordPress. And we'll dive a lot more into that here in just a moment, but I would love to take a moment just for yourself to maybe tell the audience who don't know about you, just a little bit about your background.
All right. So I started writing professional code in, I guess, 94, 95, and I built a website for my business at the time, which was not tech related. And
Cool.
Then a few years later, 2 years later, I did some side gigs for fun. It was a hobby thing for me. Anyway, a few years later, I sold that business, and then I became a full-time freelancer. Then after a time, I started building my own SaaS products, and then I started, I just started marketing my own SaaS products, and then I started putting out articles and tutorials for the heck of it, and then I just got a good response, and it just built up from there. The last SaaS product, SaaS is software as a service, last SaaS product that I took to market was Studio Web, which is an interactive training platform that schools use to teach people how to write code. And I came up with that prototype with my team about 12 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
And so I started doing YouTube. I had one of my assistants throw up a bunch of YouTube videos on YouTube, and then I discovered years later that I had 10,000 subscribers, and I said, I want to learn how to use a camera. So it was a hobby project. I said, I'm going to do a video a day for 1 year. And if you go look at those videos, they're still up there. Sometimes I'm purple, sometimes I'm blue, sometimes I'm green. So anybody who knows cameras knows what the problem was. And I just learned it was just a hobby, but then it just started growing and growing and growing. And here we are.
I think you've mastered it, to be fair. You've done an exceptional job with it. I think the fun thing to always ask people, so I look at myself, it's really strange, right? So the story of DevSlopes, I came into it 2 years after they were creating courses formally, and we were transitioning to an academy format, right? And I'm kind of the story of somebody who had entrepreneurial tendencies, but wasn't necessarily a creator. And so coming into DevSlopes, I was able to kind of take it and really scale it up and make something special for all of us. When I look at you, were you always kind of like that entrepreneurial vibe, like growing up, anything along those lines?
Yeah, I was surrounded by it all my life. So my parents had businesses, both my mother and my father. And from, say, about 10 years old, it would just be sitting around the table and they'd just be talking about business all the time. And so, yeah, I was surrounded by business, and I had no intention of becoming getting into business entrepreneurship. But it just kind of happened. When I was 17, I was working on something, and anyway, long story short, it just became a business. So it's in the blood. So yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur. Last time I had a job working for somebody, I was 19 years old, 18, 19, and I took a job as a bouncer in nightclubs.
No way.
So I could work at night as a bouncer, and that left my days free to work on the business and go to school and so on.
Wait,
So
do you do jiu-jitsu or anything like that? I thought I remember reading that you did some kind of martial arts.
Yeah, I did a lot of martial arts. I did. I started training judo when I was 10 years old, and then
Oh, wow.
Kyokushin karate. Then I've done, catch kemo. I'm a black belt in that, and I lots of boxing, and I did Thai boxing, all kinds of different things. Yeah, I was at the last gym I trained at for a while. I was at an MMA gym, and Georges St. Pierre was the biggest name there. I've been in a ring a couple of times with him. When he's like 10 years younger than me.
Yep.
So I did just boxing with him. But we had a lot of good guys there.
Was
But
it
yeah, I did a lot
TriStar
of-
by chance? Was it
No,
TriStar Gym?
TriStar is Gamma. TriStar is it's right up here, but he moved to. He used to train at Gamma, and then things happened. He went up to TriStar, and I don't know him too well. He's a good guy though. He's like if you see George the way he is on TV or on screen, he's a genuine, very nice guy.
It's funny. So the reason why I bring this up, I do jiu-jitsu. I'm on about years 5.5. I think I'm going to be getting a black belt here in the next month or a year. It'll either be next month, which will be awesome, or it won't be, and I'm going to be disappointed for the next year. But the really funny part is our CTO, his name is Peter. I met him in jiu-jitsu. I begged him for forever to come work with us. Connor, who's our brand marketer, met him in jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu and martial arts has been one of the coolest ways to meet people, and I have been amazed at how many software engineers do jiu-jitsu. It's an unbelievably large amount. Yeah, so for example, in Boulder. Yeah, so I lived in Boulder for about 1.5 years. Now I live inside Denver. And the gym I was training at was right next to that gigantic Google headquarters. They bought up like 2.5 blocks of land, just a massive part, built out this enormous facility. And all of their guys would come train with us. They were so into it, they had instructors teaching at Google specifically for jiu-jitsu. It's absolutely nuts. So it might be the dorkiest thing in the world, but I tell you what, that little crossover and like the systematic aspect of being able to just work something from scratch and being able to beat people up who were like athletes growing up, and like you're someone that maybe didn't do sports and now you have the ability to do all this cool stuff. It is the coolest hobby, I feel like, for anybody who's interested in software engineering to really go get into martial arts for that specific reason.
It's funny that you mention that, because a lot of my principles in software design, some of them came from doing martial arts, which is very interesting because I saw a lot of similarities. For example, I did a lot of traditional martial arts, and you know how those are. There's a lot of wasted time in that. And I used to get into disputes with the teachers, and you see that in software, over-engineered software. The more over-engineered the library or the framework, the less productive it is, just like in martial arts. So you have the Kung Fus, the Hung Gars, and the Wing Chun. And they say it's not so much the style, but it's how they implement it. So overly complex systems just don't work. It's an old principle in engineering, KISS, right? So I saw it in martial arts, and I started seeing it in development. So back in the 90s, when Java was the hot new language, I was writing a lot of Java back then. And then the broader Java community, dominated by the big enterprises, Microsoft, BEA, IBM, and so forth, they would have these consortiums, these groups that come together, and they put out these specifications. And these specifications were just ivory tower specifications, and they would fail, EJB1, and then the community would revolt because it didn't work, and then they would come up with another spec, and then it just kept failing. And I remember watching this happen. I go, just like martial arts, just like traditional martial arts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry.
No, they don't apologize whatsoever. What I would like to bring this back to is, I feel like origin stories play a really big impact on who we choose to listen to, how they impact us, how they influence us, all of these things. So one of the things I immediately want to go back to is, one of the things you talk about growing up, you had two parents. They're both involved in businesses, everything along those lines. I know that for a fact, the DevSlopes audience, right? We serve mostly to low-income individuals who are kind of plagued with like generational curses, is a term that we traditionally use, right? So for example, myself, My mom ran a chiropractic business, but it was a little bit less that she ran a chiropractic business. She just happened to be a chiropractor in an incredibly small town where she was the only person. And my dad worked at a prison for 40 years, right? A state penitentiary with the worst type of gang members, like sexual abuse crimes and insane things like that. And growing up, I never had kind of people to look up to that had jobs in tech, marketing, literally anything. And so the reason why I talk about the impact of individuals like yourself is it seems like one of the coolest things about the era that we're in right now is the ability to kind of have these mentors that we never speak to, but are constantly in our ear, that we're constantly consuming. And I'm just imagining for yourself, knowing that you play that mentor role for individuals like myself a handful of years ago, and through hundreds of thousands of people subscribe to your YouTube channel. When you look at the life you had growing up, and maybe from people on the outside looking in, like, well, Stefan, of course he could do it, right? He grew up with parents that were showing this from a young age. He also came in at the age where software engineering was new, right? Of course he could do it, but that's not me. It's so easy to say that. I would love to hear, before we dive into anything else, these lenses really impact our ability to learn and think that we can actually achieve something. Hearing that, is there like a 10 cents or maybe any opinions you have or thoughts for people who might be thinking that for themselves?
Okay. Yeah. So we live in a golden time, unlimited information. When I was starting in business, I had to go buy books. I had to seek out. It was so much more difficult. So there's a huge advantage that you have today, because you can talk to somebody like me who's been doing this stuff for 30 years. Like that was something you had to pay big money for back in the day, if you could find them. So that's number one. Number two, I started my first business. I was like a black sheep of my family. So I left home at 17. So it's not like I had a bunch of money to start my business. In fact, when I started my first business, my net worth was $200. And this is like 1990 money. So this is like today, I don't know, you get the idea. So it was not much. And it was maybe 600. So it wasn't much. Yeah. So that's why I had to work as a bouncer at night. So I would be living literally paycheck to paycheck. And when I first started my first transaction with my business partner at the time, it was a weird business. It was fish. And so somebody called us up and said, "Hey, we got a bunch of fish to sell. You want to come and pick it up?" And so I called up the guy, said, "How much?" And then I called up a dealer, said, "How much you pay for these fish?" So I went and picked up the fish, brought them to the guy, and made $200. We thought it was the greatest thing ever. Point being is that I started with very humble roots, with no access to information, which is key, and no money. I don't know if that answers that question or not. But.
Yeah, let's dive a little bit deeper into that, right? Because again, I think that we're trying to serve a large portion of people that, you're right, getting access to information is no longer the linchpin. Quite frankly, you can go to Udemy and find some amazing curriculum from people we've never heard of, right? It's no longer a curriculum aspect. It seems like the biggest problem that people are facing right now is this aspect where there's this big disproportion of wealth. And I'm a conservative guy. I'm not the guy who's going to be screaming left and right, we need to tax rich people or not. I'm not that guy, but I am capable of seeing that we have so many people living on the bottom who just want to make a better life for themselves. But it's hard for them to connect with somebody like yourself, right? They hear, hey, you just need to stay focused and hold something in mind for 2 years, something like that, right? When you look back to, quite frankly, I can't imagine the pain of those initial years. What were the things that helped you transition through? Because you weren't being given money by parents, from what we're hearing. What were the things that allowed you, especially at 17, to be able to make that transition into tech? What did that process look like?
Well, I just saw opportunity. So I was in like this business where I dealt in rare fish, and I sold it to collectors and zoos and public aquariums. And so we import fish from South America and Africa.
Okay.
I've been on expeditions. I did it once. I went to the Amazon. I spent a month in the Amazon. So when I got out of that business, because for various reasons. So I got out of the business and I saw a huge opportunity in the tech world. Even though I was not inclined, my training in university, I was a psych major. So it's not exactly, I was terrible at math. Like I did grade 10 math twice and I failed twice. So I was not one of those nerdy math guys. And by the way, modern coding, most of it has nothing to do with math, by the way.
That's good to know.
Yeah, no. But I just saw an opportunity, so I just said, I'm going to take advantage of the opportunity. And when you're working as a bouncer and you got $200 to your name, you have motivation to work. But also, I found it fun. It was like coding I considered it a superpower. And in that you could build things and there was demand and it opened up a lot of possibility where prior to that, I saw the business world prior to that. It was much more difficult to start a business. Much more difficult. It is, when I was 18 years old, 19 years old, trying to negotiate deals with these guys in their 40s and 50s, it was unheard of at the time. Like I was like the only person I knew in my age bracket who actually even thought about starting a business. Today, it's totally changed. The culture has totally changed radically in the last 30 years. So, I don't know where I went. I don't know, what was the
Yeah, so
question?
what was it like transitioning over to tech, right? So you get out of the fish industry, exotic fish. I can't imagine the things that go into that. Transitioning over to tech, you didn't have experience with math, right?
No.
It wasn't natural towards your skills. And obviously back then you're working with much worse kind of standing from everything, right? You didn't have the frameworks we have now. You had to build ungodly amount of web pages with HTML and CSS. What was that transition like for yourself and what helped you kind of push through that wall?
But going back to martial arts, it's martial arts because as you've done jiu-jitsu, you know how it is when when you go from your white belt and then the purple belt is in jiu-jitsu it's a huge thing.
Oh yeah.
But and in that grind in between, it's almost imperceptible as a student that you're actually making progress, right? Same thing in coding, right? There's this period of grind that you're going to have to contend with where it doesn't seem like you're making progress. And again, where I learned from martial arts, what I tell people, I said, listen, you don't want to get caught into tutorial hell. You just got to get your basics, and then you have to take that leap of faith, and you got to jump in the ring and start actually trying to build things. So my background in martial arts, to answer your question, I understood the process, that process of grind, but you're not going to have clarity as you go, but you just got to keep persisting, keep moving towards your goal of being a developer or starting a business, whatever it happens to be. And again, I tell people, comprehension comes through application. The mistake I made early on when I was first trying to transition from, business owner to software developer was I was trying to understand the concepts. So I'd buy all these books and I'd read it. I became like a theoretical library. But when I actually sat down to write code, hello world alerts, JavaScript were very difficult for me. So I learned, again, back to martial arts. You know how it is. If you never spar, if you never roll, you're never going to get good and understand what you're doing. Same thing with coding. So I borrowed a lot from my martial arts training and experience, and I was able to take those experiences and bring them into my coding. So whenever I hit those walls that you hit as you're learning to write code and to build apps, I just remembered the process from my martial arts days and my business days as well. Same thing in business. And I just kept going.
And by the way, I want to give context to everybody watching. I'd say 99% of you are not meant to be business owners, and I don't mean that in a bad way, right? You can have entrepreneurial drives outside of a job, but I think the vast majority of us, if we get a job we like, with flexibility we like, challenges we like, bosses and coworkers we like, you're good to go. So don't allow any of this conversations about business or anything like that. Don't think that that's going to be the purpose of this conversation even moving forward. It's a little bit of an interesting thing being able to see somebody who's had that success. I took an alternative path, right? I didn't have any entrepreneurial people in my life, but the focus of this more than anything else is really developing that skill of being a great software engineer and how that's possible. So the one way I'd like to kind of transition this back to you, Stefan, is we talk about something called VPO, and it stands for Vision, Plan, Obstacles. I developed it with my therapist as well as kind of some inspirations from Patrick Bedavid, one of my mentors. And the idea is this: we need to have a vision for where we want to go, maybe that's the emotion. That's the emotional drive for what we want in life. For most people, it's like what we said. I just want to earn 75,000 to 100,000 a year, right? In the long term, I want to be able to pay my bills. I want to be able to be a great father, something along those lines. They have to have a vision. They have to have a plan, a clear plan to accomplish that. And they need to understand the obstacles they're going to face. Typically, internal ones are laziness and fear. External ones are things unrelated to you. Now, for yourself, when you're going into software engineering, what vision did you kind of have for your life? Was it creating software? What was the kind of idea or goal that you had in your mind with taking up software engineering?
It was a means to an end for me.
Oh,
You mind if I just do a quick adjustment on the camera?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking like a ghost now.
No concerns whatsoever. I actually appreciate the hoodie that you're wearing. I feel like it's very on brand with you and Peter. Peter wears some kind of a wool hoodie all the time. We just got back from Florida.
No.
And I was looking at him sleeping, and he had this hoodie like thrown over him that went to like right here, and he was just out the entire time. And of course, so Peter loves working typically in obscure languages. It was usually Rust. He's moving towards Go now, even more and more. And the joke I have with him is like, you software engineers are just obscure. You like finding the most obscure things sometimes to make yourself seem quirky. And for him, it was a hoodie. And like he finds all the quirky things. It's shoes, it's hoodies, it's everything across the board. So it's fun to get to see it. And by the way, if you need to adjust camera or anything like that as we go on, feel free to. It's no concerns whatsoever.
Cool. Yeah, actually, when I bought 3 copies because I like the hoodie. So I have 3 copies, and I just rotate through them.
I get it. So going back to this, vision. So when you got in software engineering, you said that it was a means to an end. Tell us a little bit more about what that meant for you. What was the end for you?
Business. I just saw it. I saw 2 things with it. I said, there's going to be huge business opportunities understanding how to write code, number one. And I also said to myself, if my businesses fail, I'm going to be developing a very valuable skill set that I could get a high-paying job with. So I like to hedge my bets that way. So I had my fallback position was the high-end job.
No, that's completely fair. You know, and one thing my head kind of jumps to is, again, what I'm always looking at when I see kind of high-level software engineers, from my experience with Mark, the previous founder of DevSlopes, when I look at Peter, when I look at you, one of the common things we hear across the board is this kind of cold approach towards getting the job done and being very calculated about it. It's kind of like that means to an end approach, right? So when I work with Peter quite a bit, he's almost always very black and white in terms of, yes, we are going to do XYZ regardless. And if something happens in the process, we don't lose, we just learn, right? Either I'm going to accomplish the goal I want, or I'm going to learn in this process. And I think what's really helpful is we could transition this to a conversation about the journey, right? And that's something that you've obviously been a big advocate for. If you want to become a software engineer, you must fall in love with the journey rather than the outcome. Because it seems that all true software engineers really have a love for that journey, in a sense, the development of that skill, rather than just thinking about what's the next job I'm going to get per se. Would you mind kind of speaking to that some?
Yeah, 100%. It's whatever profession you choose, you have to enjoy it. I got that advice when I was quite young from somebody. He said to me, whatever you do, he was highly successful, but he hated his career. And he became a drunk, and he was super, super successful. He said, whatever you do, Steph, just do something you like. Better to be poor and enjoy getting up and going to do your work than to be wealthy and hate what you do. So whether it be software development, whether you decide to go do Rust or web development, or whether you want to get a job somewhere or freelance or start a business, what I suggest is that the first thing you do is you think about how you want to live your life. Because if you enjoy what you do, and you got to marry that with natural inclinations. Like, I might like to be a singer, but I don't think I would make any money panhandling with my lack of singing skills.
I feel
you have
that.
You have to choose a skill set that aligns, that you have some talent and has some value. But yeah, choose something you like, and it's It's so important. It's so important.
Would you say it's more important to like something or be curious about it?
I think both come they come together. Like for me, I can say with software development, I was just fascinated with the idea of building a system or building a piece of software that people would use. I got a kick out of that. I really enjoyed the idea. When I wrote the piece, I got something working. Then when somebody was actually using it and finding use in it, that was I really liked that quite a bit.
That's really interesting. So we just so it's when I started working with Peter, one of the most interesting things was he's a natural builder, right? One of the things that we talked about the most was he didn't go work at a Google or any of those companies. He said first and foremost he wanted to be able to control his lifestyle. But one of the things that always kind of plagued him in the back of his mind was, okay, I built so many things, but no one used it, right? So we started having him build out some internal tooling within DevSlopes. One was kind of creating an AI note taker within HubSpot, because there's nothing that's natively in there right now. For if you're actually making calls, all of it's for Zoom right now. All of our call, like the way that we function is off of phone calls. And so he built a tool out like that. And I tell you what, one of the most interesting things was he called me the other day and he's like, so like, are people actually using this? And I said, actually, before I answer that, I'm going to call one of our reps. So I got a couple of our reps on. Shout out to Chris, Micah, and Alex. And they're like, dude, this is fucking awesome. Like, we're using this daily. We no longer have to worry about if the associates leave good or bad notes. Like, you clearly did this. In fact, can you add this to it? And Peter and Andre, shout out to Andre too, we're just like, this is so cool. Like, they're actually using this. This has to be the best feeling in the world. When that starts happening, is that almost maybe like the tipping point when you're like, okay, this is really fulfilling almost to work on something that's being used by people?
That was, for me, it was a huge part of it. I think it's a question of, in psychology, they've shown that people, if they feel useful and they accomplish things, that builds up your self-esteem. It builds up, it puts you in a better mood. People get depressed when they feel like they're useless and they can't get anything done. So, or they're not contributing in some way. So it's like it's the same psychological mechanism. When you go volunteer, you help the homeless or something, or you donate, or it just feels good. So because you're helping out, and I think when you build a piece of software and people are using it and they're getting use out of it, you get the same feeling.
Your videos must have been seen at this point tens of millions of times at a minimum, right? Tens of millions, not hundreds of millions of times. And I'm sure that you've had thousands upon thousands of students take courses from you that have been paid, like myself. Do you think that that's one of the biggest holdups for people who start this journey and find themselves 6 to 8 months in, and it just feels like they're banging their head against a wall over and over and over again, and they're falling into that this helpless cycle of it's just not working, right? Do you think that might play a really big role in why so many people fail to have that initial success?
Well, 100%. They're actually it's the free flow of information is a double-edged sword, in that there's too much choice, and again, my major is psychology, so it's like if it's been shown, if people have too many choices, it makes them unhappy. They get into analysis paralysis. In the tech space, they call it tutorial hell, because they hear about this YouTuber says, you got to learn this, and this YouTuber, you got to learn that. No, you got to learn this, you got to learn that. And people are plagued with too many choices, and then they're worried they're going to make the wrong choice. And then they start up on something, and then they hit that wall, and then they go, the wall. And then they don't feel like they're making progress. But since they got 10,000 other choices, they go down this route. I've seen it over and over again. It's very common.
What do you say to somebody that feels like they're making the wrong choice? They just went down the full stack dev route. They bought somebody's course. They just watched a YouTube video, whatever it is, right? And they've been learning it for the past couple months. They're familiar with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They're starting to play with React, and they're like, oh, I want to go into mobile. I don't want to do this. I want to go into mobile now, right? That's going to be the cure-all to everything. What's your immediate advice to that individual?
Number one, I have an expression: if you're halfway there, you're nowhere. So you want to complete. You want to complete. So if you're learning the web and you haven't finished that off, if you're not comfortable, we'll use this as an example, building a responsive website. Build that responsive website. When you've built a responsive website, then you can sort of make a choice about which direction you may want to go in. That said, what I advise people to do is, as soon as you finish your foundations, so we'll take the web stack as an example. You do your HTML5, some CSS3, some JavaScript, you can do a responsive site. It's time to step in the ring. It's time to start sparring. It's time to start building something. So what I have people do is say, go find a coffee shop, an independent coffee shop that needs a website. Go find a butcher, whatever. Your neighbor wants to start selling muffins online. Build something. Build something. That's my advice. You want to get in the ring. Another thing I always tell people is that you can't really make a wrong choice, because whether you learn JavaScript, Python, C#, Java, C++, they're all very similar. So let's say you decide to learn JavaScript and you go through it and you can walk the DOM and you've learned the basics of React and you've decided, you know what, I want to do iOS development in Swift. It's not a waste, because what you're going to find when you go learn iOS development with Swift, you're going to find that the principles that you studied
they're
in
universal.
Java, they're universal. So you're going to learn Swift in a fraction of the time. It's like, boop, oh, okay, no problem. In fact, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I had somebody recently under one of my YouTube videos, he was talking about that, where he said he tried to learn React, and he tried, he couldn't get it done. And then he just said, okay, he fell back to HTML, CSS, vanilla, JavaScript, did this for about 9 months, making money. Then he said, there was a job that came up, and he went and he was able to get his head wrapped around React within a day.
So it's just that small break of just going back to putting in that daily work, that daily grind really opened everything up for him.
Yeah. It's just exposure. It's like sparring, right? You know, I used to tell people, you know, one sparring match is worth months and months of training outside the ring, right? And then you're going to get.
Yeah.
You agree, right?
Absolutely. It's unimaginable. It's kind of the joke. We had a podcast episode yesterday. Where I talked about we're hiring on a new mentor right now. And I spoke with two separate individuals, one who had 20 years of experience, one with 10. And both of them, we asked about their experience with React. And there was nothing there. And then when we kind of Peter pressed on him a little bit, and Peter can sometimes be a little intense when kind of interviewing and asking about it. And it's, you know, it's finding this really interesting experience that, like, there are so many people who have paid experience, like they've been hired to do jobs, but when you look at what they've done, it's so blank. Like there's nothing actually there. It's, in fact, it's a very strange thing to see that the software engineering space is so odd, because it's something to where, like, all these people have portfolios of work they've done, whether it's following a React tutorial for a Netflix clone on YouTube. But the moment you put them in front of something and say, put your hands on the keyboard and build something, it's just not there, because they never put that time in. And it's so insane to me how some of these individuals get hired and are capable of hiding for like 2 years. I'll tell you something wild. I'm not going to, okay, I have to be really careful how I say this.
2 years.
No, what you're about to hear is insane. Okay, So Connor's in the production of this podcast right now, listening to this, and he's going to crack up. He knows who I'm talking about. There's an individual we know. They got hired at I don't know how much detail. He was hired at a medical facility. We'll just say that. And he was getting paid relatively well. I think it was around 180, 190. And essentially the CTO of the company just wasn't looking at him, and he had nothing on his plate. So this guy was just doing whatever he wanted throughout his day. Like, he was just working from home. He was doing nothing. And he didn't do anything for 1.5 years. No work whatsoever. He wasn't coding anything. He genuinely was doing nothing. And it's amazed me at how many people have followed those exact same routes. And what they leverage, and I think this is so powerful, because the more you connect with honesty, the more you connect with just the truth of the world and you understand this, you're so much better off. there are so many people that the way that they finesse job interviews, from what I've been seeing, is they're like, yeah, sorry, I definitely know the answer of the difference between a virtual dom and a dom. It's just I'm bad at job interviews. I promise, if you hire me, I'll be amazing. Or if you hire me, I promise. It's not that I'm just a bad test taker. I promise I know this knowledge. I'm just a bad test taker. And coming from somebody with like dyslexia and a learning disability, the unfortunate truth is that you're probably not a bad test taker, right? Like you probably don't know what you're talking about. Like just transparently, 8 out of 10 times they don't know what they're talking about. So I want to transition this a little bit for you, because when I look at you, you've been talking about freelancing for forever. You've been talking about PHP and the importance of it, everything along those lines, especially working with small businesses, which is what our main focus is here. I'll go as far as let's give you the title, the Godfather of Freelancing. We're going to have some fun here, be a little dramatic, because I'm a little bit of a dramatic person. So, if you take a step back, you have somebody coming to you, they've been working within Java, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React. They're relatively skilled. They have experience with SQL, so they could launch full stack applications. What's your advice to them to go speak to that first coffee shop? To go get their first custom dev project?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's, well, the first thing I say is, I tell people, there's got to be, it's old market. You got to put up a website. And I tell people, even if you're selling yourself as a coder, make sure that website looks really, really good, because it's going to judge your coding skills based on the aesthetics of the site, strangely enough. So you have to have that in place. Okay, you got that. Then you start telling people, hey, by the way, I build sites. I do this, I do that, whatever it is that you do. And you just start networking, talking to people. And then one thing you could do is you go to like Google Maps and coffee shops and then see if they got any websites, or maybe they got a really old website, and this, you just gotta put in the time, And so when you go approach them, you want to try to approach them with a warm lead. You don't want to, you could go into a place and say, hey, do you need a website? Chance of that being successful, 1 in 200, right? So you can do it, and it will eventually work. But if you can warm up the leads by filtering who might be the better targets, that is a much better approach. Also, just like if, let's say you want to deal with a local small business, and you can write some SEO aware articles, if you will, that local small business owner might find you via Google search. And that happens quite a bit even today, even on social as well.
Can we touch on that a little bit more? So I have I've been known to be a little harsh about this with all of our students. One of the things I preach to them, and just for a little bit of context, right? We have a lot of students that Uber drivers, warehouse workers, teachers, everything along those lines, maybe between jobs, right? None of them have any formal marketing experience, anything along those lines. So the first thing I tell every single student is typically when they get freelance projects, one of the things people say is, hey, I need a website and I want to be able to be seen online. And so they tread into this category of SEO. And the first thing I typically tell all of them is don't fucking try it. And the reason why I say that, I say this, by the way, I do this very dramatically. I come from the marketing world. And one of the things I always tell them is like, hey, right, if you're going to sell yourself as an SEO person, first and foremost, understand people are going to have expectations. Right? Mm-hmm. Like if you ever mention SEO, you better sure as shit have an idea of what you're talking about, right? And you bet, like, it can't be I watched a YouTube video. You need to have something to really support you from that standpoint. What suggestions? Because it does seem like, though, and I really don't have a deep knowledge of it, so I kind of want to open this up to you. It does seem like, though, there's a lot of validity within when you're building a site and making it more, I guess, searchable, and maybe something that would help with SEO. Can you speak to the technical side maybe of some benefits of that, and maybe just some baselines, if you have that experience, to be able to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So traditionally, SEO was about making the site more searchable. This is largely antiquated now, because if you design the site with just normal, the ways that we design sites these days, your sites are SEO already. In terms of the code, and the structure of the sites, they're very searchable these days. Back in the 90s, when this whole SEO profession came about, the sites were not searchable for two reasons. A, they were the way they were constructed they were a black box for the search engines, and B, the search engines weren't very good either. So that's gone. So when I say SEO today, it's more about web marketing. So just instead of trying to use special keywords and research keywords, and you could do that to a certain extent, but I've never believed in gaming the system, because you're always going to get caught in that way. I always just write for your audience. So if you want to attract people who are interested in, I'll just use the coffee shop as an example. If you want to attract people who are interested in coffee, just write honestly about your coffee shop and what different types of coffee and how you prepare coffee. And the engines will find that, And there's a few basic rules, like stay in your playground. So if you have a site about coffee, don't link to a site about the latest Audi or Porsche coming out. You're going to dilute your value there. Have your social media is huge, of course. So have your social media populated with coffee-related content. And there's basic strategies. You could go on for a while. Like, for example, if you want to, Google favors its own platform. So if you put out videos on coffee, put them on YouTube, and then embed those YouTube videos in your site. Those type of things, Do you want me to go on more? Or?
No, yeah. If you have more, feel free to. This is really practical.
Yeah, it's just, and also again, it's psychology plays a big role in this. So there's this book that was put out in the 90s called The Long Tail, and it was about long tail economics. And I got the book when it was first published, and I saw on the back cover of the book, the Google founder said, this is going to have a heavy influence on how we design search. They said, oh, that's cool. So then I designed all these long tail sites, and sure enough, the rankings went up. And long tail only refers to it's just about niching down, essentially. So you want to target, the more niche that you are in your, we'll call it SEO for the sake of argument, the more long tail that you are in how you target, the more likely you're going to get the audience that you want. So if the basic example, the classic example, if you type in coffee shop, you're going to compete with every coffee shop in the world. But you go coffee shop in North Montreal, boom, all of a sudden the competition is going to be far, far less. You're going to get less traffic, but you're going to get the traffic that you want. People are interested in coffee shops in northern Montreal. Who cares if you get a high ranking or you get search results for coffee shops in California and you're in Montreal, it's useless to you.
Absolutely. It's kind of like saying, what's the best vanilla latte in Denver in general, and trying to get somebody to come up from that standpoint. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
It's basic stuff, right? But a lot of the SEO rules, a lot of the web marketing stuff is very marginal, meaning that they can have some impact, but if you just stick to the core principles, that's like 80% of it. It's the old Pareto principle, the 80-20. The 20% gives you 80% of results. So you learn this as an entrepreneur as well. You concentrate on that crucial 20%, and you don't waste your time on the marginal stuff.
One thing I would like to kind of touch on one more time is we talk about freelancing. We have a slightly different approach to where all of our freelancing, what's initially built is based off using kind of no-code solutions. We're focusing on this idea of BizOps engineering, and the idea here is, and I can be very dramatic. I will emphasize that across the board. One of the things I frequently will mention to all of our students is, who gives a shit what your website looks anymore? Like, everybody can create websites. Like, no one cares about your website anymore if they want to look at your code. They want to see actual like SaaS projects if you're working on anything of meaning. When it comes to kind of portfolio experience to put on for freelancing, one of the things we talk about is we want to see that you have the ability to problem solve with soft skills as well as solving business solutions. It seems like one of the problems that is happening is all these software engineers getting trained through boot camps, courses, universities, whatever, and they're coming out as technicians, right? They can technically do some stuff, but they lack the capacity to solve business problems. So what we've really focused on is learning how to implement CRMs for businesses, learning how to implement reputation management tools for businesses, learning how to use drag and drop builders, whether it's WordPress, something like Unbounce, pretty much relatively pre-built low-cost solutions that can be built in a fraction of the time and are very easy to maintain. And then using that as the experience to help you bridge the gap professionally. What I would like to hear is kind of like, your 10 cents on that. Like if you have, let's say, a handful of people applying for jobs, especially for an entry-level dev position, which is, let's be honest, right? That person is potentially going to be useless for 6 months to 2 years, right? Any entry-level dev that's coming in, it's going to take them a while to most likely get comfortable with the code base, right? Especially if it's a team of 6 to 8 people, someone has to be comfortable mentoring that individual. And by the way, if you think I'm wrong in any sense, push back. I love hearing like that. That's so helpful. So having somebody come in whose previous experience is working with small businesses, building all these systems, connecting them together, and understanding solutions rather than necessarily just creating custom solutions for people. I'd love to hear your 10 cents on that.
I agree with everything except for one thing.
Perfect.
The portfolio website, the only reason I say it should look good, because people are going to make an initial snap judgment on who you are as a person by your website. And it's like, if you have a sloppy website, or if you come in dressed sloppily, it's a lizard brain thing. It's a primitive thing. It's not a logical thing. They're just going to make a deep lizard assessment. Lizard is reference to lizard brain, and it's going to color everything how they perceive you. So I'll give you a quick example. One of my biggest contracts I got as a developer when I was freelancing in the 90s, they only told me a year after the fact why they went with me. They had an array of companies, and they said, okay, we're going to go with you. And I built all their sites and their systems for they had a dozen companies. It was a great contract. And the reason they gave me the business, because they came to my place and they saw that it was very clean. That's what they told me. They said, your site looked good, but they saw that when it came to your office, your desk was clean, and the office was clean, and it wasn't a big mess, and there wasn't drinks everywhere. And they figured if he's clean in his office, he's going to be writing clean, good code.
I feel attacked right now. Okay, first and foremost, my place is very dirty right now. I'm looking at a pizza deal across the board. I have like 2 drinks right here. So everybody, I'm sitting here as a CEO who's supposed to be preaching these things, and even I have to do a lot of cleaning up. I'd be horrified for you to get in my car where my 2 kids have their car. It's an absolute nightmare. But it's funny when I look at success leaves clues and failure leaves just as many. It seems like that's such a valuable trait to think about, that cleanliness. Right? Do you think that that's almost part of a story to tell somebody in a job interview process? Actually, you know what? I'm gonna steal this for a story real fast. We were hiring for sales reps. This is hilarious. We were hiring for sales reps a long time ago. It was like 2 months ago. And so we were taking a handful of people through a job process, the job search. We have a sales team right now of 10 people, and it's always growing. And one of the things we do is for the last stage of the interview is to allow them to interview with our current sales reps. That gives them the ability to know, first and foremost, did we lie about what they can expect comp-wise? What's the actual company going to be like? I'm a very big figurehead for the company. Is this CEO fantastic? Is he an asshole? I don't know what it's like. The stability of the company. All those aspects. And in the group interview once, we had an individual say, I'm a very detail-oriented, like a clean person. That matters a lot to me. So I need to always make sure I'm a nitty-gritty, attention to detail type person. And I got a text afterwards, after everything was, to join the call when it was all finished. And one of our guys, Alex, shout out to Alex, one of the things he said was, he was like, did anybody notice that he said he was an attention to detail type person? But his dressers were literally open in the background behind him for his clothes. That's bullshit. He's lying to us right now. There's no way he's telling the truth. And it seems like in interviews, all those things, now sitting back thinking about it, that does seem like a genuinely real concern, a thing that we're looking for from the lizard brain, like you said. How big of an impact do you see that actually playing for day-to-day life?
Oh, it's huge. It's I know from my psych background, it's massive. You see, I'm not a psychologist, but that was my major, and I kept up to date with it to a certain extent. One of the things they discovered was that our brains, our primitive brains, which we don't control directly, our primitive brains will make a bunch of decisions about things, and then our cognitive mind, our thinking mind, the logical self, will then come up with a reason, and oftentimes it's a bullshit reason, why we come to conclusions. So you just made my point, right? Just the little detail of this messy dresser had a huge impact. So make sure you got a clean website. Make sure when you show up to the interview, you don't smell. Make sure your clothes are clean. Don't be obnoxious. Nobody trusts a coder in a suit and a tie. But you know what I mean? It's like, don't show up in a hoodie.
I don't know. I feel like Lex Friedman's going to disagree with you. Lex Friedman's got the perfect suit on every single interview, but no, I feel like he's the only person. Yeah, exactly. It's funny. Every time I speak with Peter about it too, and I know that we're running short on time here. Every time I speak to Peter about this, that's one thing he always says. He's like, "No, I don't trust him. I don't trust it. There's no way. Nobody wears suits and ties. It's countercultural to what we do. It just does not make sense." So, for example, I didn't know. Whenever I heard that JavaScript was based off of Monty Python. Or no, Python, my fault. Python. I thought Python was like, oh, it's a cool like snake. That's awesome. And he's like, no, it's from a Monty Python script. And I was like, are you joking right now? Like, that's stupid. So knowing that like the entire culture of software engineering is troll based essentially is one of the funniest things to have to learn about the entire industry.
Yeah, well, Monty Python was if you were a nerd, you were into Monty Python, no question about it. So especially from his age group, from that time frame, for sure. It's like every nerd knew it was Monty Python was right up there at the very top,
Absolutely. Well, I want to take a small transition just because I think it's so valuable to get your opinion on this. We spend a decent amount of money on paid ads, and every ad, AI's taking this over. Y'all got no chance. You're so dumb. NVIDIA's stock is skyrocketing $1 gajillion by the day, right? Their CEO is saying, yeah, this is all obsolete. It's disappearing tomorrow, right? Like, y'all are never going to be around. We got ChatGPT 4.0 or 4.0, whatever they're calling it. From a genuine perspective of someone who's as experienced as you, that's been around the block for quite a bit, I'd love to hear your 10 cents when it comes to this.
Sure. So having been in this for 30 years, I can tell you that I've seen other technologies come before AI, which were far greater, far more impactful and disruptive to the coding world than AI is right now, and I see for a while. I think AI is important, but it does speed up things quite a bit. But I've seen other technologies, again, were much more disruptive. For example, the web itself. Prior to the web, everybody built thick client apps, VB6, VB5, so on. Then the web came around and it totally just changed that whole game. We talked about WordPress. Content management systems had a huge impact in terms of web design and development, because a lot of people were building custom CRMs constantly, or building out websites with, raw HTML. And then everybody started going into WordPress. And when WordPress came out, everybody was, oh my God, it's the end of web design. It just changed the game. It shifted things over. So I did a video on this recently. Why did the CEO of NVIDIA say don't learn to code? I thought that was interesting. So I go to NVIDIA's site, and they got a bunch of job posting for developers. First point. Second point, I said, there's got to be something going on here. So I went looking. Oh, look, they got their own no-code platform, right?
Which is going to require a lot of software engineers to maintain.
Well, yes, but my point was they want people to use their platform to develop applications, not the competing stuff. That's my guess. I don't mind read. I don't, but that's my guess. But that being said, I've been in the game. I have many interests, and as soon as I see that, if I ever saw a day where coding was going away, I would let people know. It's like, it's not. I'm again, for me, coding from 30 years ago is always a means to an end. It's a tool set. Just like I like what you do, where you tell people, go learn this no-code platform here. If Wix works for you, use Wix. If WordPress works for you, use WordPress. Whatever tool, Shopify. It's all cool. These are all tools. And as you become more experienced as a developer, you learn to look at all these things. You just say, okay, when I first developed Studio Web, I came up with the idea. The first thing I did was I started looking around what was out there already. And I got my lead developer at the time, said, let's look what's out there already. And we found something called Moodle, and we actually built a prototype off of Moodle just to see if we can get that to work. And it didn't work, so we scrapped that and we had to build from scratch because the idea what we had was totally different. But point is, don't look at AI or content management systems or any low-code platform or no-code platform comes out as competition. They're just tools that you use as a developer. As you hinted at earlier on in the conversation, a big part about being a successful developer is being able to have those communication skills, to be able to extract requirements, to be able to make choices that are intelligent vis-a-vis the technologies that you use to implement for the particular job at hand, and you roll it out.
Well, Stefan, I can't express this again. This was a beyond insightful episode to be able to have you on. I would love to have you on again in the future. You're somebody that in this field, for anybody who's new to software engineering, I feel like you are a key figure that they have to be following. You bring a level of insight to the industry that I don't have. Right, that I'm not that software engineer I was born in '95. Okay, the level of experience that you have on this is so much more than me. I'm not going to be able to compete with that. So being able to, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, by 1995, I had been arrested, been in street brawls, and then I built apps. Got into legal disputes with business partners. Anyway.
Oh yeah, it's all the joys of it. Well, again, that's why we leverage. Let's find the titans that came before us, and if we're going to stand on their shoulders, I think someone like you is so valuable in showing that. Right. So I would love to have you on again in the future. Everybody, thank you all so much again for listening. You can find Stefan at Stefan Mischook. His YouTube is going to be down below, as well as his IG. Did I see that you have a relatively new IG? Because listen, you need thousands of followers on that. Okay, I think I saw like 2,500. Let's bump that up to about 10,000. We could jump that up relatively quickly. But again, thank you so much for the time, and we'll see everybody here on episode number 14 coming in a couple days.
It was great. Great conversations, great questions. You're providing value to the community as well.
I really appreciate it, man. It's been a